the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ are the foundations of the Christian faith. These events sparked the largest religious movement in human history, with billions of followers around the world. Yet despite this profound impact, many still dismiss the story of Jesus as little more than legend, an embellished tale fabricated over centuries. But what if I told you there was actual physical evidence that proves the resurrection truly happened? Among the many religious relics discovered over the past 2 millennia, many researchers believe one stands out as providing such evidence: a linen cloth known as the Shroud of Turin. This artifact has single-handedly become one of the most studied and hotly debated objects in all of religious history. The Shroud of Turin measures approximately 14 feet long by 3.5 feet wide, and bears the faint but detailed image of a man who appears to have suffered crucifixion. And for many researchers, this linen cloth is not just any artistic relic, but possibly the actual burial cloth of Jesus Christ, preserving what some believe to be a real-life photonegative image of him at the very moment of his resurrection. What makes the image on the cloth unique is its dual view. Both the front and back of the man's body are visible, laid out in a way that matches how a person would have been wrapped in the cloth. The front image appears on one half and the back on the other. The wounds depicted are consistent with crucifixion: nail marks on the wrists and feet, scourge marks on the back, and a puncture wound on the side. Additionally, bloodstains in a reddish-brown hue align with these injuries and suggest direct contact with a wounded body. Even more intriguing, the image is superficial, meaning it resides on only the outermost fibers of the cloth, affecting just 1/millionth of a meter of the cloth's thickness. Scientists argue this would be virtually impossible to achieve with pigment, paint, or dye, as these substances naturally soak deep into the fabric rather than remaining solely on the surface. This unusual characteristic makes the origin of the image all the more mysterious. Additionally, scientific analysis has revealed that the image contains three-dimensional information, another baffling feature that continues to defy modern explanation. The shroud first appeared in historical records in 14th century France and was later moved to Turin, Italy in the 16th century, where it remains housed in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. While its documented history only goes back so far, many believe the shroud's true origins are much older. In this video, we'll perform a deep dive into the evidence supporting the shroud's authenticity, examine the detractors' arguments, and let you determine at the end which side you find to be more compelling. And be sure to stick around until the end, as I'll reveal details on some of the most intriguing evidence uncovered to date. And if you enjoy thoughtful, faith-focused investigations like this one, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Despite being one of the most fascinating artifacts in religious history, the Shroud of Turin has no shortage of skeptics. The most widely cited argument against its authenticity comes from a radiocarbon dating study conducted in 1988, which concluded the cloth originated in the 14th century, seemingly confirming it as a medieval forgery. But significant controversy surrounding this study has only grown over time. Specifically, Barry Schwartz, a Jewish member of the original Shroud of Turin research project, was one of the first to speak out against these findings, and later claimed the carbon dating was performed on a section of the cloth that had been repaired, not on the original fabric.
And yet we found cotton in the corner that was ultimately radiocarbon dated, and that implied that there was a repair or reweaving done in that corner, and so they dated a repaired corner of the shroud, which could not give us an accurate date for anywhere else on that cloth.
He also alleged that the researchers were paid £1 million to discredit the shroud's authenticity.
The Oxford laboratory, one of the 3 labs that examined the shroud, received £1 million from anonymous donors for debunking the shroud, and Dr. Michael Tide of the British Museum left the British Museum and took a permanent chair at Oxford with some of that money. So I hate to say follow the money, but perhaps that had some influence.
To back his argument, Schwartz pointed to damage sustained during a 1532 fire at the Sainte-Chapelle in Chambéry, France, which left scorch marks and water stains on the shroud. Nuns had sewn patches onto the damaged areas afterward, and Schwartz argued that the samples tested in 1988 came from one of these patch sections. This claim by Schwartz caught the attention of Ray Rogers, a respected chemist from Los Alamos National Laboratory. In 2004, Rogers published a study that found major flaws in the 1988 carbon dating. He focused on the chemical breakdown of vanillin, a compound found in linen that degrades over time. According to his analysis, linen from the dated timeframe of the shroud should contain around 37% of its original vanillin. Yet the shroud samples he examined showed no trace of it, indicating a much older origin. Rogers' findings therefore supported Schwartz's claims that the carbon-dated material came from a later repair, not the original cloth. To further test this theory, Rogers compared fibers from the carbon-dated area to those from the main body of the shroud. He found that the tested section contained cotton fibers coated with a gum dye mordant, or materials consistent with medieval textile repair techniques. In contrast, the main body of the shroud was composed of pure linen and lacked these substances.
You've got photomicrographs that demonstrate this very clearly. The cotton fibers from the radiocarbon sample are fairly heavily coated with the gum dye mordant, and some of the linen fibers don't show any of that at all. They look just as slick as anything.
Finally, Rogers also discovered alizarin red dye in the carbon-dated sample, which is a pigment historically used to match the color of patch fabric to the original cloth. This further suggests that the tested area was a repaired section and not the original material. Another major critique of the Shroud of Turin's authenticity came from Walter McCrone, a microscopist who in 1980 identified cinnabar on the fibers of the shroud. Cinnabar is a mercury sulfide pigment typically used in ancient artwork. As a result, McCrone concluded that the image had been painted, supporting the idea of a medieval forgery. At the time, Ray Rogers had assisted McCrone with this research and was even acknowledged in a literature paper published by McCrone on these findings. However, in 1982, Rogers published a separate study that directly challenged this conclusion by McCrone. Drawing from further investigations by the Shroud of Turin Research Project, he emphasized that while cinnabar particles were present, they were found in areas away from the image itself. Extensive scientific analysis, including radiography, electron microscopy, and chemical testing, showed that the image was substanceless. No pigments, binders, or dyes were found in the area of the image. There were also no brushstrokes, no layering, and no signs that the image had been painted or drawn in any conventional manner. While the absence of pigments and brushstrokes challenges the idea that the Shroud of Turin was painted, it also opens the door to deeper questions. If not by artistic means, then how was the image formed? One particularly fascinating study attempted to answer this question. Physicist John Jackson conducted groundbreaking research titled Correlation of Image Intensity on the Turin Shroud with the 3D Structure of a Human Body Shape. Their goal was to explore whether the image on the shroud contains three-dimensional information and what that might reveal about how it was created. Utilizing photogrammetric techniques, the team analyzed variations in image intensity across the cloth and discovered a remarkable pattern. They found that the brightness of the image correlated with the distance between the cloth and the body it covered. In other words, parts of the body that would have been closer to the cloth appear lighter, while those further away appear darker. This strongly suggests the image wasn't created as a flat two-dimensional depiction, but contains encoded depth information, something extremely difficult to replicate using traditional artistic methods. However, in a 1982 paper, physicist Marvin Moeller sought to downplay these findings. He argued the three-dimensional appearance of the shroud's image could have been an illusion, possibly caused by uneven contact between the cloth and the body, or by natural processes like pressure or heat. Moeller also proposed that any perceived 3D effect might simply be the result of photographic or optical distortions. Yet Jackson argued that critics of their findings often rely on selective subjective rebuttals, and to this day, none have offered a coherent explanation for the shroud's uniquely combined image characteristics.
I must say that that anyone who wants to try to explain the shroud image, and this work needs to continue most definitely, but one has to make sure that you're working on a hypothesis that can explain the totality of all image characteristics, and you can't just go and pick and choose. You can't pick and choose what you want.
Adding further weight to the Shroud of Turin research project's findings, more recent modern computer modeling using advanced 3D software has successfully and more accurately replicated the image's depth characteristics. These studies confirm that the image aligns with the realistic contours of a human form, which is something no known medieval technique has been able to reproduce, even with technology available today. But the mystery of the Shroud of Turin goes beyond imaging and computer analysis. Some of the most compelling evidence for its authenticity comes from archaeological and forensic investigations. In a published 1983 paper, archaeologist William Meacham, a veteran researcher in the field of ancient artifacts, argued that no known object in history has undergone more scientific scrutiny than the Shroud of Turin, while still so thoroughly defiling the label of forgery through evidence. Drawing on extensive multidisciplinary evidence, Meacham outlines how medical experts have found the shroud to display an anatomically flawless portrayal of a crucified man. These medical experts found signs of rigor mortis, or a natural stiffening of the body that occurs a few hours after death, which were evident in the posture and muscle tone of the figure. Furthermore, the location of wounds on the body and flow patterns of actual human blood, confirmed through extensive analysis, were found to align with expectations of a Roman crucifixion. Meacham also highlights the presence of dumbbell-shaped scourge marks, which correspond to a Roman flagrum, which was a brutal whip used at the time with multiple leather cords, often embedded with sharp metal or bone fragments. He also notes the distinctive puncture wound on the right side, which would match the type of injury inflicted by a Roman lancia, a military spear used at the time during close combat. Taken together, these details provide forensic consistency with both historical Roman execution methods and the biblical account of Jesus' death. Meacham also pointed out in this paper that the Shroud of Turin carries botanical clues that help trace its historical journey. In a detailed 1978 study led by Swiss criminologist Max Frey, pollen samples were collected directly from the linen surface. Frey identified over 50 distinct types of pollen, many of which are native to very specific regions, including Jerusalem, the Negev Desert, the Dead Sea region, and parts of Anatolia and modern-day Turkey. Of particular note, several of the pollen species found in the shroud grow only in the springtime around Jerusalem, aligning closely with the biblical timing of the crucifixion during Passover. Additionally, the textile itself reinforces this connection to antiquity. The cloth is woven in a 3-to-1 herringbone twill pattern, a style known in the ancient world and consistent with high-quality linen from the 1st century. When viewed together, the botanical and textile evidence forms a strong case that the shroud not only originated from the ancient Middle East, but also traveled through regions historically associated with early Christianity, well before it surfaced in medieval Europe. Finally, in Meacham's view, the shroud is not only consistent with what we'd expect from a burial cloth of a crucified man from the 1st century, it's unlike anything ever discovered in archaeology. And although Moeller attempts to offer naturalistic explanations for the formation of the image on the shroud, the broader body of evidence points in a different direction. Specifically, the precise correlation between image intensity and body shape, the image's superficiality, the three-dimensional properties, the presence of human blood, the regional pollen trace, and the repeated failure to replicate these features all suggest something extraordinary. And when taken together, they point to the Shroud of Turin as a truly unique artifact which still cannot be fully explained by modern science. But despite all these findings, the lingering question remains, and is still perhaps the most mysterious. If the image on the shroud is substanceless, contains three-dimensional properties, and only affects the outermost fibers, then just how was it created? Recent research from scientists at the ENEA Research Center in Frascati, Italy, sought to explore this very question. Their experiments revealed that short bursts of ultraviolet light produced a coloration on the linen remarkably similar to that of the shroud. Using laser pulses lasting only a few nanoseconds, researchers were able to create surface discoloration on linen that mimicked the superficial, non-penetrating quality of the shroud's image. This effect was only achieved under very precise conditions of extremely short bursts of light and specific energy levels. In other words, whatever produced the image on the shroud had to have been an intense yet highly controlled event. Even more fascinating, this UV-induced discoloration was the result of a cold photochemical reaction, meaning the cloth was not heated, burned, or scorched to produce the discoloration. This aligns with the image on the shroud, which shows no signs of heat damage, further challenging theories that rely on thermal contact or conventional artistic methods. While this process doesn't explain exactly how the original image was made, it strongly suggests that such an effect would have been impossible to replicate using the technology available during the medieval period. The precision and energy levels required simply did not exist at that time. Building on this mystery, a more recent study by the International Institute for Advanced Studies of Space Representation Sciences proposed a bold new theory, that the image was formed not by contact, but by an unknown energy source emitted from within the body wrapped in the shroud. The researchers introduced the concept of parallel projection, similar to modern radiography, suggesting that the image was created by successive bursts of energy. These bursts, they theorized, may have imprinted not only the body's form, but also additional items found in the image, such as the crown of thorns and embedded nails. Remarkably, their studies reveal this method would have required the energy source to be radiated outward from the body wrapped within the cloth, challenging conventional scientific knowledge and pointing towards an image formation process that defies modern explanation. Yet despite all these incredible discoveries, the debate over the shroud's authenticity continues, largely due to the 1988 radiocarbon dating study, which many skeptics still view as their strongest evidence. But more recent research is beginning to shake that foundation, and is likely starting to make even the most committed skeptics start to sweat. In 2022, a team led by scientist Liberato De Caro conducted a groundbreaking study using wide-angle X-ray scattering, or WAX for short, to estimate the shroud's age. Unlike radiocarbon dating, which can be affected by contamination, WAX examines the natural breakdown of cellulose, which is the primary structural component of linen. Here's how it works. Over time, cellulose chains in linen degrade in a predictable way. By firing X-rays at the fabric and analyzing how they scatter, scientists can measure the extent of this molecular aging, creating a kind of molecular fingerprint that correlates with the cloth's age, similar to how internal rings reveal the age of a tree. De Caro's team applied this method to a thread from the same region of the shroud tested in 1988, and the results were astonishing. The aging profile of the shroud's linen matched almost identically with that of a known 1st century textile discovered in Masada, Israel, dated between 55 and 74 AD. In other words, based on the physical degradation of its cellulose structure, the Shroud of Turin appears to be approximately 2,000 years old, a result that aligns remarkably well with the traditional timeline of Jesus' crucifixion. These results are not only a significant blow to the 1988 study, but they are a potential paradigm shift, adding yet another powerful layer of evidence to support the Shroud of Turin's authenticity as the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, our Lord. So after reviewing the evidence from both sides, which do you find to be more convincing? Should we put our trust in the skeptics' arguments, rooted primarily in a single carbon dating study performed on a possibly repaired section of the cloth, along with speculative theories that have never successfully reproduced the shroud's image? Or should we give more weight to the opposing side's case, one that is built on verified human bloodstains consistent with crucifixion wounds, anatomically precise imaging that aligns with 1st century Roman execution, three-dimensional topographic encoding unlike any known artwork, botanical traces linking the cloth to Jerusalem, ultraviolet experiments replicating the image's unusual characteristics, and a cutting-edge molecular dating technique that places the cloth squarely in the time of Christ? It's probably not too hard for you to guess which side I currently support, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below.